You know what, guys? The Bible gives us a clue. In Matthew chapter 16, verse 17 through 18, there's this passage, and Jesus is talking to His disciples. And Jesus says in Matthew 16, He says, Who do you say that I am? Who do people say that I am? And the disciples say, well, some say that you're Elijah. And some of the other disciples says, well, some say that you're Jeremiah, or that you're a prophet. And even some others say that you're John the Baptist. And Jesus asked His disciples in this story, He said, but who do you say that I am? And when He said that, Peter chimed up and Peter said, you know what? You are Christ, the Son of God. You are the Christ. Lord, you are the Christ, the Son of God. And you know what Jesus said? He said, you answer correctly. He said, Simon Bar-Jonah, son of Bar-Jonah, flesh and blood hasn't revealed this to you, but this had to be revealed to you by my Father. And I say to you, on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it. You know, I picked this passage for a reason because there's something very interesting in the Greek language, and we got to get into the Greek here just for a minute so that we can understand something. Peter's name in Greek here, when it says, on this rock I will build my church, Peter's name in Greek was Petros. And that means, Petros just simply means a small rock or a little rock. Have you ever heard of Little Rock? Little Rock, Arkansas, right? A little rock. So he's being compared to a small rock or a little rock. That's the Petros. And Petros sounds very similar to another Greek word that is Petra, with an A right here, Petra, which means a rock or a giant like Boulder, right? Like Boulder, Colorado, right? But except bigger, like a huge boulder. And if we understand what's going on in this simple passage, this one verse in the Greek language, Jesus' statement would go something like this. Jesus replied to Peter's comment of, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. Jesus replied, blessed are you, Petros, or small rock, for this cannot have been revealed to you by man, but by my heavenly Father. I tell you that you are Petros, a small rock, and on this Petra, or this giant boulder, I will build my church. See, Christ is not going to build His church. God is not going to build His church on a Petros, on people's individual ability, on the Apostle Paul's ability. He's not an eternal ability, but Jesus Christ is the God-man. He's this eternal being that came into the flesh. There's no other man like Him. He's the 200% man. He's the God-man. And what this verse is telling us is that God is saying, I'm not going to build on my kingdom on a little rock, but on a big, giant rock. The rock of ages, Jesus Christ. We have a greater rock as Christians, a greater rock of performance. We have the rock of ages, right? The rock of all ages. It's so important to understand the idea of the Petra, right? And so David Price, he represents the Petros and self-reliance, human ability, and he's represented by our illustration this morning by the marshmallows, right? Alrighty then. But you know what? We're going to look at something else. How many people, you've watched Indiana Jones, right? The Last Crusade, right? We got one here showing. Most everybody has seen Indiana Jones at some time. Temple of Doom, Last Crusade. We have a spot in the story of Indiana Jones where it actually shows in Jordan. I don't know if you've ever heard of the city of Petra, but it's in Jordan. It's still there. It's this huge, major metropolitan city that was a major intersection connecting the world in ancient times. It was a very important part of civilization in the ancient world, right? And so this thing was built into the side of a mountain. It was carved out of rock. And that actually, in his Last Crusade, in Indiana Jones' Last Crusade, we actually see the rosy red city right there. That's what it's called. We're going to take a look at that clip here really quickly because it represents the world system and man's ability to build. Let's look at it. this is a great shot right here of the rosy red city. And, you know, right here, when Harrison Ford finally found the Holy Grail inside the Cosnaut of Alpharon, this was at Petra. This right here is Petra. And at the climax of the film's getting ready to end, The Last Crusade, there's this new myth that was born. But Harrison Ford and all of his editors and scriptwriters, they didn't build this myth. They were following a long line of myths that have gone down since prior to the Middle Ages and all the way into ancient time. But you know what? I'm going to tell you something about Petra, the city. The Bible says something about Petra. There is a biblical prophecy, even though, and people would have never believed it at that time, because Petra was this huge metropolitan city, right? That was a major intersection in commerce, and it connected all of the known world at that time, right? But there was this biblical prophecy about Petra that it would become a place of jackals, and that there would just be grass and wild goats, and that the city would be desolate. And nobody would have ever believed that prophecy. But now you can see, all of these years later, you can see that what the Bible said, the prophecy about Petra, was the truth. This city, Petra, comes to absolute ruin. And now all it is an archaeological dig where people go. There's no city, there's no anything. All that's left is all of their work that they cut out. And so Petra represents the world system. Petra represents a human worldview